When I worked for Disney and they said lie to the public, I said, fuck you.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
Whoa, calm down, Tim. Take it easy. Susan WikiWiki's gonna hit your stream with the demonetization hammer. Hello, everybody. Welcome to NeoUnrealist. What is going on? What has notorious fence-sitting milquetoast centrist Tim Pool breaking one of his own rules about not using obscenities on his videos and in his live streams? What made this radical centrist, this militant man of the middle, so angry that he tossed his rule aside and went on a lengthy, obscenity-laced, black-pilled rant? I mean, the long and short of it is that Tim on his stream last night, the Timcast IRL podcast, with his co-hosts Adam and Lydia, was decrying the lethargy of the so-called silent majority in the face of a revolutionary communist movement lashing out at the foundations of the United States itself. You see, Adam Crigler, or Soy Jesus as many of Tim Pool's viewers have dubbed him, he's new to the red pill. You know, having had his eyes open to the truth of the world that he inhabits, Adam's soul has not yet been crushed and beaten down by the apathy and inaction of the masses. Adam still possesses the optimism of someone who hasn't spent years watching things incrementally get worse and worse, the proverbial slow frog boil of the cult of wokeness's march through the institutions. Tim seems to have moved on from the red pill and seems to be downing handfuls of the black pill. Let me paint the picture for you. Our leaders, especially in the state and local governments, just locked down almost our entire society for over 3 months in response to the spread of the Wuhan coronavirus. You could see it then. Tim, who like me saw the need for these lockdowns, but also like me began to show some concern when it was clear that the worst had passed. Hospitals everywhere were not in danger of being overrun anymore. Remember, we were told that we were doing this to bend the curve so hospital capacity to deal with the critically ill patients wouldn't be reached, and for the most part, mission accomplished. We did that. Only in New York City was there ever any real danger of that capacity being exceeded, but, thanks to the massive flood of resources sent in by the Trump administration, and in a couple months, it was clear that New York City had more than what it needed. So much so that the hospital ship Comfort that was sent here was barely used at all and was sent back home to Norfolk eventually, Norfolk, Virginia. And the emergency overflow hospitals that were set up by the Trump administration, like at the Jacob Javits Convention Center, they were hardly used. Eventually they were just phased out of use. They weren't needed. So mission accomplished. President Trump began to signal that it was time to start thinking about opening things back up again. And lo and behold, the powers that be, especially among Democrat-run states and cities, kept moving the goalposts and pushing back against any proposal, any effort to reopen public life, even in limited stages. And these forces, they practically labeled anyone speaking of such a thing as wanting to kill off all the grandmas in some mass geronticide. Nurses stood athwart any attempt to protest and petition the government for a return to normalcy and to relinquish the power that we as a society basically agreed to temporarily allow them. It seems as if when that dam broke, when people just, said, we're just forget what you tell us, we're just going to do what we're going to do regardless, a new rationale had to be whipped up to maintain the state of artificial chaos. And so, like a bolt of lightning, came the murder of George Floyd by former Minneapolis police officer Chauvin, and it's as if a torch had been put to the pile of kindling laid down by years of anti-cop rhetoric and social justice diatribes that basically boiled down to, old-fashioned anti-Americanism. And what would have been dismissed as anti-Americanism in previous decades is now, it's now wrapped in the harmless sounding slogan of Black Lives Matter, which is at its core a Marxist revolutionary movement. It's nothing more than a Trojan horse for achieving goals that the far left has tried to achieve for years, but they couldn't obtain it at the ballot box by a traditional participatory democracy. So Tim Pool has seen, in the past 20-something days, progress from a widely accepted conclusion that Chauvin clearly murdered George Floyd and that it's right and just that he be charged and convicted of that terrible crime. But clearly, though, this has long since stopped being about George Floyd or even the radical call for defunding or outright abolishing police departments. The left excused looting and rioting as the language of the unheard. How dare you criticize the looters and the rioters? This was all about so-called peaceful protests. Or mostly peaceful, some people would concede. Never mind that the peaceful protests were what was providing the necessary cover for masked hordes to spread across the Democrat-run cities to pillage and burn. An entire swath of formerly bucolic Minneapolis, Minnesota, had most of its businesses and infrastructure burned down and will now have to endure years, if not decades, of inescapable grinding poverty and blight, as no outside business investment is likely to return in the foreseeable future. Then you had the waves of statue vandalism start, beginning with the pulling down of, the low-hanging fruit, the Confederate statues. Those relics of a bygone age in America, when, I guess, in an effort to mollify white Southern resentment over their loss of the Civil War and the hardships of Reconstruction, their monuments to Confederate figures were largely tolerated. And for many years, though a small minority would complain about them from time to time, realistically, these were non-issues for decades. Wasn't a lot of people all fired up about something that largely happened in the 1860s, but not so in recent years. So those statues have suddenly become a cause célèbre of the woke left, and as time and naturally the generations have passed, they've come and gone. Fewer and fewer people, even in the Deep South, feel any meaningful connection to Confederate ancestors who may have fought or died in that war. So they started pulling down the statues, and most people seem to find, even though they found it ugly and repulsive, the natural American inclination to abhor lawlessness and criminality, these people destroying public property, but few people felt strongly invested enough about Confederate statues to basically invest any personal stake in defending them. So down the statues they went. Except, obviously, it didn't stop with the Confederates, and it was never about the Confederate statues. Remember, this is a Marxist revolutionary movement that wants to erase history and rewrite it to fit its grand sweeping narrative. So everything has to go. So next came the Christopher Columbus statues. Not quite as odious and out of fashion as the Confederates, as in some quarters, Columbus is still viewed favorably, especially by Italian populations and those Hispanics that have an affinity for their European roots, their homeland on the Iberian Peninsula. Still, Columbus, apart from those places where the statue stands in a largely Italian area, those are vulnerable where there's no natural community around it to oppose efforts to remove those statues. But it didn't stop there. Once derided as a slippery slope argument, some conspiracy theory of Donald Trump, when he famously asked in 2017 that he sees they're pulling down the statues of Robert E. Lee, Jefferson Davis today, but he's like, where does it go from there next week? George Washington and Thomas Jefferson? Oh, conspiracy theories, you got fact checks against Trump. Well, it didn't even take a week. Washington down, Jefferson down. And still, they're not satisfied. Black Lives Matter leader Shaun King, Talcum X, well, even before then, you even started seeing calls for, if you're taking down Gandhi statues. I'm not joking. They were talking about taking down a statue of Gandhi because, people don't realize this. Gandhi lived in Africa for a while, and he expressed thoughts about Africans that, well, let's just say would be found problematic by the modern woke social justice warrior. But now you have Black Lives Matter leader Shaun King, Talcum X himself. He's now declared that Jesus, yes, that Jesus Christ, as worshipped by Christians around the world, the Son of their God, and in most denominations regarded as divine. Shaun King has declared that apparently the Jews of ancient Israel were somehow actually black. Yes, we was Hebrews apparently. I guess that's the new rallying cry. So Now, one of the leaders of Black Lives Matter is calling for non-black depictions of Jesus in statuary or church stained glass windows to be taken down. Antifa has announced its intent to gather at Gettysburg, if you could believe this, on Independence Day on July 4th, and at that hallowed battleground, that marks the turning point battle of the American Civil War where it was fought, they plan to burn an American flag on the site. Now let me note that again. They're not burning a Confederate flag at Gettysburg. They will be burning an American flag on Independence Day at Gettysburg, at the site where thousands of Americans died to win the war that preserved the Union and ultimately ended slavery. So this movement has long since shown its hand as a full-blown anti-American movement, and Tim Pool doesn't understand why the vast majority of people, whether Republican or Democrat, who clearly don't hold anti-American beliefs at their core, haven't stood up and said the word no. You're not going to do this. So let's listen to Tim's rant in greater detail, and we'll just end up with that. Tim fucking Pool, in his own words, about his amazement how so few are standing up to say no to this insanity.
You're special. You can do whatever you put your mind to. And it's like, sure, but you have to work for it. You aren't special. We're ants on this earth. You gotta work. You gotta get up and do work if you want to be anything.
These conversations have been happening in circles like the intellectual dark web,
Okay.
and on shows like Joe Rogan, where the biggest podcast in the world routinely rags
Biggest podcast in the world
is completely unable to stop the rapid transformation of society and the destruction of our founding fathers and the general who defeated the Confederates.
Dude.
Even though the Joe Rogan podcast has been around for a decade, and he's hosted Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro and the Weinstein brothers and Dave Rubin and Crowder, and we've had these conversations over and over and over again. Every single American who is not in that 8% fringe gets on their knees and says, please leave me alone whenever someone comes to them and threatens their job. They will not stand up for themselves. That's what I've been saying about what they need to do. People need to do something, and the first step is telling your boss, shut up or I quit. But they won't. So video games get made that are ridiculous, that have insane plots and insane ideologies. People complain about it. They get called Nazis in the press.
Yep.
And the regular people know it's crazy. They're watching their cities burn down. And then what happens when they rip down Thomas Jefferson? Nothing.
You're
and
right.
the Democrats in New York City are calling now for Thomas Jefferson to be removed from the New York City Council chamber. And where are our politicians? Where are the regular Americans, the silent majority, to stand up and say, we'll be silent no longer? Nowhere to be found. What are they going to do? They're going to go in the voting booth and say, I'm going to pull the lever for Trump, who in the past 4 years has been unable to stop any of this. We've had a great economy. A lot of people made a lot of money. And what's happened? It's been worse. So here's what I think is going to happen. If Trump wins, the left will go insane and burn it all to the ground, and regular people will hide in their homes with their newly found love of guns, and they'll say, oh no, what do we do? And the left will probably gain tons of ground and go insane, and people will say, please leave me alone. And if Joe Biden wins, they'll take over all our cultural institutions, they'll put psychotic and insane definitions in our dictionary, and they will take over, and regular Americans will say, please, for the love of God, just leave me alone. And they never will. They'll never stop coming. They will take your job away. They will come for your parents. You will do something wrong, they'll fire your mom. They'll come to your house with fireworks and guns, and Americans will still just say, please, just leave me alone. And that's how it is. Even in the Revolutionary War, most people, the largest majority of people, were non-initiated. There was a small faction saying no revolution. There was a larger faction saying revolution, and the bulk said, please just leave me alone. So long as we've been dealing with the psychotic cancel culture, and I've been hearing about people like James Lindsay saying this, and Coleman Hughes saying, I get messages all the time from people saying this is insane and must stop. Well, where are you to stand up at your job and tell your boss to shut up when he says, I'm going to put out this bland brand message that panders to these woke lunatics? Where are you to say, if you do that, I quit? They say, fine, quit. Okay, I will, and I'll go start my own company. Nowhere to be found. So we have these conversations, and what happens? I'm under threat from being banned every single day. I just had a video today labeled as hate speech, and when I asked them to overturn it, they said, not this one. You're on thin ice, but don't worry, Tim, you mostly play by the rules. We're okay with what you say. So how long until they cut my channel off? And they've been doing it over and over again for the past several years, and no one is people are nowhere to be found. Now, of course, they go online and they'll post things, but then when it comes to their real life job, when it comes to the woke mob coming for them, they just bend the knee and they beg, please, please, woke lunatics, just don't hurt me and I'll leave you alone. I'll let you have whatever you want, because I don't care about the future for my children. I don't care about where this country goes. I don't care about all the statues they've just destroyed. And then what happens? The Republicans, nowhere to be found.
You're absolutely right.
I have no confidence in any of these people to do anything. I can sit here all day and guess what? Smack talk me all day and night. Say, Tim Pool, all you do is complain about things. You're completely right. But at least I quit my job. When I worked for Disney and they said, lie to the public, I said, fuck you. And I told them, cut my contract off. And they said, no. Welcome to the golden handcuffs, Tim. You got one more year under lock and key. And then I said, okay, well, I'm not going to do what you want. And then finally it came to August and I said, bye-bye, I'm going to go do my own thing. And guess what? It worked. So where the fuck is everybody else? Nowhere to fucking be found. Congratulations, we're demonetized. I don't give a shit at this point.
You know
no
what?
one is doing anything. And for years, I've routinely said, you need to stand up for yourself and tell these people to back off. And you won't do it. Maybe you guys will, but most people won't. So there's people online complaining all day and night.
Yep.
Okay, walk away. Stop. They won't do it. So why should I have any confidence after a decade of this? I'm willing to walk away and go live in the woods when all this just falls apart. I walked away from working with a Disney company that was offering to pay me fat cash if I just played ball.
Yep.
And I said, no, I won't do it. And you know what they did at that company? They called me a white supremacist. The white people at this company who are getting fat cash from Disney called me, the mixed race guy, the white supremacist.
That's all for this NeoUnrealist. If you want to help the channel, do me a favor. Hit like for this video, leave a comment below, mash down the subscribe button if you're not already subbed to the channel, and click on the notification bell beside it. Put it on the all setting to keep up with newer content. Or if you want to contribute directly to the channel, toss your hard-earned dollars into the tip jar, follow the links below to Patreon, Subscribestar, or PayPal. Or if you watch this on BitChute, you can just click on the green tip pledge button on the video player when it uploads later on. Thanks for watching.